So we left off here where it's talking about salt and how a cell is depleted of salt can catch these diseases. And then it continues on here. Let's start off on the second paragraph there. He's talking about Dr. Barefoot, and he says he has actual records of healings, but also scientists admit these things, and he put them forward in his book. He says, I guess his book is called Coral Calcium. You remember this was years ago. Coral calcium was a liquid supplement. And I guess it's still available. I don't know. We haven't taken it in so long. But notice what he says. It continues on, and you might want to underline this next sentence or highlight it, whatever. He says, did you know there is a prophecy that there is a Malach, a messenger of Yahweh, who will stand in defense of the Son in these last days? Okay, he was standing in defense of the Son in these last days. Before we do that, let's cover these vocabulary words when I'm thinking about it first. These vocabulary words that we'll go through, these are the last ones that we'll cover. Of course, time, in Daniel 7:25, time is 3.5 years. Times, of course, Daniel 7:25, is 7 years or 2 3.5 year periods. Then you have the time of trouble, which is the last 3.5 years, or a horrible time when 4/5 of the earth's population will be totally wiped out. And that is what we have to look forward to. 4/5 of the earth's population being totally wiped out. And that can be a pretty sight. The word many, according to Daniel 9:27, is the Hebrew word is rabin, and the word desolator is the one who makes desolate the Lord of the heavenly habitation. And the word power in Daniel 12, verse 7, is of course speaking about Yahweh's laws. Now we'll get that. That's straight from the book, so we'll get that when we get to it. So you notice here he says it's a prophecy that there is a Malach, a messenger, standing in the sun. Anybody remember that prophecy there? Revelation 19:17, okay? And he says, and I saw a Malach standing in the sun. Of course, the word Malach is Greek 32. It means a messenger, by implication, a pastor. So you can see how detailed Yahweh is in giving this information. The word standing, according to this, is the Greek word 2476 in Strong's. It means to hold up. In Thayer's, it means to make firm, to establish, to cause a person or a thing to keep his or its place. In other words, not to let something go out of place, but to bring it back to the remembrance of people. To stand, to be intact. I thought it was interesting because it talks about of a family or a kingdom. Family or a kingdom. And we know that, the sun and everything that Yahweh has made is made up of microorganisms. Even the rays that we receive from the sun's rays, those things are actually particles that are emitted from the sun millions and millions and millions of miles. It takes over 8 minutes to reach you, and it contacts your skin. Then from your skin, it goes into your body and goes through a whole series of different things before it makes the vitamin D. It's amazing the way that Yahweh created us. It also means to establish a thing, to cause it to stand, to uphold or sustain the authority or force of anything. And of course, that's what Pastor did, is he upheld and he has sustained the authority of the Scriptures. And he upheld the fact that the sun is healthy for us. Okay? And here's one of the places that we see that. The sun is healthy for us. In Ecclesiastes 11:7, it says, the light is truly sweet, and it is it's a pleasant thing for the eyes to behold the sun. Okay? We'll get into that next part a little bit. All right. So let's go back to the book here. So he says, did you know that? It's actually there. The things that Yahweh wrote about every one of his servants are fantastic. It says, stand in the sun. He says, I'm getting way ahead of the sermon. He says, I won't be able to bring this completely out this feast, but I'll bring it right now. He says, I believe it says, I saw this Malach standing in the sun. It doesn't make any sense the way it's written. Look up the word, and it says, standing in defense of the sun. He's standing for it, or he's telling people No, the sun is not harmful for you. It's healthy for you. And of course, that's exactly what Pastor has done. That's what Dr. Barefoot heard too. He says, and he wrote a book on it. Now he's getting filthy rich. He says, why didn't one of you guys do that? I told you this before I told him that. So he jokes about the fact that, if we'd have taken his word, we could have actually been the wealthy people. But the sun is healthy for us. We know that. Okay, let's continue on here. He continues to read in Daniel, okay, in Daniel here, and he says, he will confirm a covenant. He will confirm a covenant. That's what I had here. The word confirm, just to let you know what it means, it'll help you understand that verse better. The word confirm means, it's 1396 in Brown, Driver, and Briggs, and it means to compel. And that's exactly what they do. This covenant that they made, the people they compel them to keep it. But also notice it means force, overbearing behavior, constraint. And of course that's exactly what they do. They constrain the people underneath certain terms that they must meet and certain things that they want them to do before they get the money. It means to be strong, to be mighty, absolute, mighty in power, stronger than, mightier among, and prevail. And of course that shows you exactly the way democracy is, and the fact that the United States is the main leader in that, along with the rest of the quartet. And so they're putting the people under these constraints that they have to do these certain things or they won't get the money and they won't have peace in their country. So you can see all this is showing the evil of what goes on in democracy. Okay, let's continue on here. He says, this is the last part of the 70 weeks of years that's spoken of in verse 24. He says, then we see this taking place here, and this is the cleansing of the people. This is the cleansing of the people. Now, of course, the cleansing of the people of Yahweh is in our mind, in our spirits, and in our bodies, of course, as we take to cleanse us and go through these various things. But the wars are being held back, so of course, so that we can be ready ourselves. Here's something from the ninth book. The ninth book of Israel, chapter 6, verse 13, 613. He says, whether you know it or not, you're on trial right now with Yahweh. And of course, the courage that you're developing right now, that he's bringing it on step by step, is very necessary for you to stand up in these last days when it gets close to the end and the change that will take place in your body. And of course, that power that you're going to receive. Okay, so we know that a change is taking place within our bodies as we cleanse in our bodies, as Yahweh is preparing his people through this great cleansing that is taking place in mind and in spirit and within our bodies and so forth, as he's preparing us for the jobs that we have to be ready to take on. We're on the home stretch now. Okay, continuing in the book, it says, in Daniel 9, he showed when the people would actually be cleansed in the last days. Then here he shows the last week of mankind and its governments and how they would end. It's interesting because he says how he shows how the people would actually be cleansed in the last days. Remember, we went through an extreme time of cleansing for Yahweh's people. We went through all the various cleanses, and we went through different sprinklings. Remember we had the great sprinkling. We were sprinkled 21 times at one time before the feast came about. So we were really demonstrating to Yahweh that we desired to do what he wanted us to do. And I don't remember. Y'all remember when we called for a fast? You remember we called for a fast for the whole house of Yahweh, if possible. It said, if you could possibly fast at that time, fast. And we all came in sackcloth and ashes and came in the sanctuary and prayed together. And then Pastor even came in here with us and he prayed and so forth. That was the time in which we sought Yahweh to show him how much we really desired to be his people. So he says here, then he shows him the last week of mankind. Notice, the last week of mankind. Get that, man. That's pretty intense. And then he shows the last week of mankind and his governments and how they would end. The last week. That's the last time period of mankind, the way it is right now, ruling under this beastly system. And of course, remember that the government under this beastly system is democracy, okay, or democracy. Okay, it's run by this beastly system. It's not accordance with Yahweh's laws. And he shows how it's going to end, too, he says. So he says he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. Okay, 1 week. Or 7 years. Okay, because that's what 1 week symbolizes, is 7 years. And this is 7 years of action. Just like the whole 70 weeks that we're in the last week right now. Okay, so remember, it's the whole thing is a plan of action, as we covered before. Things are taking place throughout that time. Now he says, then in the midst of the week, of course, is 7 years. And we know that this time that he's speaking of in Daniel 12, from these and other scriptures, and you remember this is one of the vocabulary words that we covered, time. Underline that. Time means 3.5 years. Okay? 3.5 years. You want to know that. Time means 3.5 years. So he says, that's the reason I told you yesterday. He says, the time means 3.5 years. And then you have times, which means 7 years. Or 2 3.5-year periods. Okay, and that's the way it was divided up. 2 3.5-year periods, and then we had the midst in between, the time in between. If you remember, it says that Satan, prophecy tells you that Satan would be cast down in the midst. And you remember Netanyahu stopped it, and after he had stopped it, then, of course, not too long after that, Satan was cast down to earth. So he says that adds up to 10.5 years at that time, which we're in the last year at this time. It says, any of this and all of it could end any time and go into the 42 moons of war. So he was well aware of the fact that, and he was warning everybody that it could start at any time. Okay, and eventually we have seen it start back now. 42 moons of war. Now, verse 27, he says, he will confirm a covenant with many. Many, many, many. Okay. And underline that word many, and he says, then we have the word rabbin. Now we got handouts here for Daniel 12:7. Daniel 12:7. Who has that?
Then I heard the man clothed in linen who on that future day is teaching when he held up his right hand and his left hand toward heaven and vowed by him who lives forever that it will be for a time, times, and a half, when Yahweh will have accomplished pouring out his power through his holy people, all these things will be finished.
Now, notice that. All these things are going to be finished. Here's what he just read, Daniel 12:7. There we go. Daniel 12:7. And I heard the man clothed in linen, who on that future day is teaching, when he held up his right hand and his left hand. You know, now when that took place, remember he was over at the stage over there. Okay? He was at that stage standing up. And when you stand up this way, you have your right hand and your left hand. Okay? If you look up those words, right and left hand, it actually refers to the north and the south. And so his hands was facing directly this way, north and south, just exactly the way it was. Okay? And we all saw him proclaim these exact words. Remember, he stopped and he said it, he released the quartet, and then got right back into a sermon again. You know? That was pretty cool. Okay, so notice here in Daniel 12:7, he says he held up his right hand and his left hand, and notice he vowed. Okay, he vowed by him who lives forever that it would be for a time, times, and a half. And then it's going to be finished. Now, Revelations 10:5-7 says, it talks about the same thing. And the Moloch which I saw standing upon the sea and upon the earth lifted up his hand to heaven. Okay, just like you see in Daniel, he vowed, he lifted up his hands, and he vowed by him who lives forever. It's the same thing that Daniel said. Who created heaven and the things that are in it, and the earth and the things that are in it, and the sea and the things which are in it. that his witness would testify that the 3.5 years, the time he has appointed as spoken of by Daniel, will continue without delay. Okay, that was one of the latest translations. Because in the days of the voice of the seventh Moloch, he will begin to sound, the great secret of Yahweh would be finished, as he declared to his servants, the prophets. So you can compare that, just as a reference note, Daniel 12:7 and Revelations 10:5-7. Okay? Now, going back to the book here, he says, and he will confirm a covenant with many. That word is rabin. He says he will confirm this covenant with many. Let me go through this with you. This is from, just a note from, now I know everybody knows this, but there are a lot of people who may not have ever heard of this before. I don't know. But in the birth of the nuclear baby, pages 9 and 10, it says in Daniel 9:27, okay, it says, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. It says, notice the phrase, and he will confirm a covenant with many in Daniel 9:27. From the NIV, that's the New International Version, Interlinear Hebrew English Old Testament by John Kohlenberger III, it says, remember Hebrew is read from right to left, okay, and he will confirm covenant with the many ones, okay. And the words translated many in this verse, which is circled there, is the Hebrew word rabim, which is the plural form of the Hebrew word rab. Usually when you see the I-M or the yod mem, that's a plural of a Hebrew word. So you have rab here and then rabim with those letters. So it's the Hebrew word rabim, which is the plural form of the Hebrew word rab, according to the Analytical Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon by Benjamin Davison on page 674. The Hebrew Aramaic English Dictionary by Marcus Jathro, volume 1, page 721, shows us that the Hebrew plural ending yod mem can be interchanged with yod nun. And that's what it says here is mem, the 13th letter of the alphabet, that's the Hebrew alphabet. It interchanges with in, or nun, especially in the plural termination mem yod. Now remember, we just saw where rabim is a plural word. The English spelling for this Hebrew word or name can be either rabim or rabin. Either way, it has the same meaning, the many. It's extremely interesting to note that for this time period in which this covenant was signed, that Daniel 9:27 could be literally translated, and he will confirm a covenant with rabin for 7 years. It would be difficult to get more specific than that. And you got to agree. I mean, you can't get more specific than that. You know, it's amazing that what Yahweh did by allowing that to take place. You know, and this was something that, remember, this shows you that Yahweh is the only one, he's the only being who can foretell the future. And he set all these things up into play. Remember, he's the one who made the Hebrew alphabet. So he has all this stuff set up way ahead of time from us. But remember, as it says in the scriptures, all these things were written for us, for our benefit, those of us who live in the last days. So let's get back to the book. He says, he will confirm this covenant with rabin for 1 week, and in the midst of that week, he will cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. He will cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. Let's get an idea what that sacrifice and oblation is, okay? In this 6th book of Israel, chapter 39, on 12/16/2006, he says, the make or break issues, these 6 key make or break issues, the parties must address for disarmament to work, for this peaceful solution to work. They've got to do this. He says, now this is what Daniel was speaking of, where they all agreed to the sacrifice and oblation. But then, you remember they all making sacrifices, all the people over there were making sacrifices. But then, and they're not talking about burning sacrifices, but sacrifices in their lives and their jobs and land and giving up land and all this kind of stuff. But then halfway through the plan, then Netanyahu steps in. The parties must address these for it to work. Now, if only one of them worked, well, of course, they would stop right there. But they've got to have these 6 things take place, and they've got to go one step at a time for it to do it. Now, in the midst of the trib, it's the midst of this time period that Daniel showed us here. He said that this would stop in the midst. The sacrifice would stop on both sides. In fact, and it did stop. Netanyahu shut it down, and they went back to the normal fighting and bickering and raising hell again. Where they were supposed to have a peace agreement here, well, they broke it, of course, and the sacrifice stopped and the oblation was stopped, as Daniel put it. And, of course, that's what took place with Netanyahu. Okay? So, that gives you an idea what he's talking about here, about the sacrifice and oblation to cease. It would cause it to cease. Let's go back to the book here. He says, we had sermons explaining these 2 words, and that was part of them. And to cease. Instead, he will cause the prevalence of the Lord of heaven. Or as Yeshua said, the Lord of the heavenly habitation, which was translated by Daniel and in other places as the abomination that makes desolation. We know what abomination is. An abomination is something that Yahweh just can't stand. Okay? Because an abomination means you cut yourself totally off from Yahweh. The abomination that makes desolate. So this abominable thing here is what is going to be the reason for this desolation. Okay? And it's all the abominations that mankind is doing at this time that is bringing this about. Is bringing about his own destruction. There's many people who are thinking that they're partying up, living up life right now, going to their big parties and doing all these abominable sins of things that are not proper according to Yahweh's laws. But it's this lifestyle that's causing their own destruction, and they don't even realize it. So the abomination that makes desolation, even until the destruction that is determined, notice. Okay, so there's a time. It's going to take place. This Lord of this heaven will be there until this time of destruction is determined, and when it's determined, that's when it's going to take place. Now underline this next verse, the next sentence there. The destruction that is determined, of course, is the nuclear war that will take place in that last 42 moons. Okay, and that's given in Revelation chapters 11 and 13. So this destruction that's determined is the nuclear war. That's what they're going to bring upon themselves. But they're too ignorant to even know that. So the destruction is determined is the nuclear war that would take place in the last 42 moons. Okay? Continuing on, he says, until the destruction that is determined, in other words, it's set in motion. Okay? It's determined because Yahweh says this is what's going to take place. It's all part of his plan, and it's going to take place. You cannot stop the plan of Yahweh in any way. So until the destruction is determined, will be poured out upon the desolator, notice. Remember the desolator, that was one of the words that we saw in the vocabulary. That is the one who makes desolate, or the Lord of the heavenly habitation. Okay? So he said it's going to be poured out. In other words, when the sentences will be given, when the sentence will be given for this beastly system to be no more, it will be no more. But it's got to accomplish Yahweh's plan first. So notice it says, this is where he defines it. He says, be poured upon the desolator, or the one who makes desolate, as we just read. There is a footnote. Let's see. Oh, for your references, you can always look in the Book of Yahweh. In Daniel 9:27, there's a footnote that is there. Okay, and that footnote, it shows the word Baal Shemim, okay? And that's usually translated abomination of desolation in Daniel 8:13, Daniel 9:27, and Daniel 11:31, and Daniel 12:11. And it says compare Isaiah 14:12 through 17. Of course, that talks about Satan's reign and so forth. And then it says, the Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible, volume 1, page 13, shows these words are correctly translated, the Lord of heaven. Okay? The Lord of heaven. And of course, that's who everybody worships, and everybody in the world today worships, right? The Lord who is in heaven. Okay? So let's get back to the book here. And of course, it's that Lord of heaven, notice, who is the desolator. She is the one who's responsible. Daniel 12, and the thing is, the Lord is always looked upon as being, people used to think about Jesus and so forth as being. You remember how many times it's been in the newsletters about the word Lord? The Greek is Kyrios, right? And it says it's used to replace the name of Yahweh, and also it's used for anything, he says, for what comes up new. Remember, he's talking about the fact that it's actually giving away the fact that they came up with the name Jesus, okay, for their God. And so it's applied to, the Lord is applied to Jesus. However, we also know in the scriptures and stuff that Satan, of course, is a female being. And it shows the deception because the fact that in many different places, countries and so forth, she is worshipped as both either male or female, but also in some places male and female, because some of the gods and the goddesses take on the characteristics of being both male and female. And they even try and say that about Yahweh, that Yahweh is both male and female. That's one of the crazy teachings that's out in the world as well. But it just shows the confusion that's taking place even in the minds of the gods, that they themselves don't even know what gender they are. Okay, continuing on here, he says, in Daniel 12:1, okay, where he says, the Lord of the Lord of the heavenly habitation is that actually makes desolate. In Daniel 12:1, he says, at that time, Micaiah will stand up, the great prince, which rules for the children of your people, and there will be a time, and we know that's also different in translation, but however, it says, there will be a time, the word time now, okay, underline this again. It says the word time, there's also 3.5 years. And also underline the next 2 sentences here. This is the time of trouble, or the 3.5 years of trouble. It's going to be horrible. This is when 4/5 of the earth's population will be totally wiped out at that time. Notice that word time, okay, it's made mention in there. Time refers to a specific time of period, or period of time that Yahweh is prophecies come to pass. Okay, okay. We do have a handout here, right? Psalm 27:5.
In the time of trouble, you will hide us in your pavilion, in your house, in the secret place you will hide us. You will set us high upon a rock.
Okay, another one here, it goes along with that. You can use this as your reference notes if you want. It's Psalm 31:20, because he says, you shall hide us in the secret, or the hiding place of your presence. And notice, from the pride of man, and you shall keep us protected in a pavilion from the strife of tongues. Okay, because it is the pride of man and the strife of their tongues that they can't have peace. There's no way they can have peace. It makes peace in their eyes impossible because there's no unity. There's nothing to hold them together. They have nothing in democracy that can hold them together. Remember that. So the only answer, of course, will eventually be to wipe out their enemies with all-out nuclear war. And it's going to cause 4/5 of the Earth's population to be destroyed. Okay? But notice, Yahweh will hide us in his secret place. Okay? Very, very, very important to realize that Yahweh is going to protect us as long as we do what he tells us to do. As long as we're obedient, he's going to take care of us. Okay, let's continue on here. So we see then it's going to be the time, that was the first 3.5 years, then the times, which would be 2 times or 7 years, and then the half or the time that is severed or cut short. When Yahweh will have accomplished pouring out his power, notice, his power. Okay, that was one of the words Remember, power means his laws, okay? His laws. So, and that's exactly what it says right here. So you notice all of these vocabulary words are already in the book. He's going to finish out pouring out his power, his laws, through his holy people, and all these things will be finished. Now notice that the pouring out of his power, the pouring out of his laws is going to be accomplished. Once that's done, then it says it will be finished. But notice, he's pouring out his power, how? Through his holy people. You see it written there? Through his holy people, okay? So it's through you. It's through all of us in the house of Yahweh that Yahweh is teaching us and pouring out his power, his laws, his spirit within us so that we can learn of his laws and keep his laws and live together in harmony. That's what it's all about. Once we learn that lesson, then he will be ready to use us. And then then it says all things will be finished, just like we read before in Daniel and also in Revelation, that the time would be finished, okay? In the days of the seventh Moloch, which shows us that it's in the last days, okay? At the end of the last time, notice, when it starts, we have 42 moons of war that will be cut short. And then we have the plan of Yahweh that will be finished at that time. So we see here there's 42 moons of war. It's going to be cut short. And then we have the plan of Yahweh is going to be finished. Okay, so this 42 moons is going to be cut short. We don't know how long. We have no idea exactly how long that 42 moons will continue on. Yahweh could bring it up to the very end, if he so chose. Or he could do it tonight, right? You never know, right? But we know that Yahweh says his people would be protected, so it's not. See, the Christians always say, Jesus could come tonight. What if he missed the bus? Maybe, I don't know. But, it's crazy because the fact that Yahweh says, and if you listen to what Pastor said, okay, Yeshua said, no man knows the day or the hour. But what did he just recently say? He said, Yahweh hasn't showed us that yet, but I think he will. Listen to his sermon. Okay, so it's cut short and there's a finished time. Now he says, Yahweh's not going to reveal it, underline this sentence here, Yahweh is not going to reveal it exactly because of the fact he does not want anyone here, or he does not want anyone in his kingdom who is not there for his laws. Okay? Because if you just did it because you saw it, then you wouldn't believe without seeing. But he wants to make sure that you want to be in his kingdom because you love his laws and you want to keep his laws. Okay? So if you cannot see the difference right now, he says, I think possibly you need to talk to your counselors. The difference in Yahweh's laws, notice the difference, underline Yahweh's laws and democracy, is that Yahweh's laws are based on righteous behavior for all people. They bind people together in a loving, caring atmosphere of consideration for the whole family and concern for the welfare of the person and the body. That whole paragraph is important there. You can underline that whole paragraph. I wanted to show something. Okay. Let's continue on here. It says, democracy looks great to the public. It does. To the public, it looks great. It looks fantastic because they can't see the difference, okay? They don't understand it. They think democracy is fine because on the outside, it looks fine. They don't understand it. And Yahweh said that they wouldn't understand it, right? He said they would not understand it. Who's got the handout of Isaiah 6, verse 10? Isaiah 6, verse 10.
Make the heart of this people fat and make their ears heavy and shut their ears, or they will see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and convert and be healed, saved.
All right. Here's what he just read for your reference notes there. Isaiah 6:10 says, make the heart of this people fat and make their ears heavy. Because remember, they want them tickled, right, as the scripture says? And shut their eyes, because of course Satan and the gods have blinded the minds of everybody on this earth. Or, now notice this, they will see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and convert and be healed or be saved. Now, Yahweh could not accomplish his plan if everybody did hear and see at this time. So man must learn the lesson that democracy that's being pushed, remember, by the first beast, will not bring peace. In 1 Corinthians 2:14, it says, but the natural man, who's not under the influence of Yahweh's Holy Spirit, does not accept, notice, the things of the Spirit of Yahweh, for they are foolishness to him. Nor can he understand them because they are spiritually discerned. And of course, spiritually discerned means only through the keeping of Yahweh's law can you possibly understand, the keeping and the practicing of Yahweh's law. That's the only way that you can possibly understand what Yahweh has in store for his people. Okay, so it goes along what he says here is they don't understand democracy, and Yahweh said that they wouldn't understand these things. Okay, so he says it looks great to them that it looks great. It's very deceiving to them, right? It looks great to them that democracy is a government of the people and by the people. Okay? And notice that. Of the people and by the people. But it's not of Yahweh. Okay? It's of the people and by the people. The word people. According to Webster's, people means human beings making up a group or an assembly, or linked by a common interest. Okay? So they're linked by a common interest. And of course, that common interest is what? Sin and lawlessness, right? That's what people are linked together with, sin and lawlessness. So this government of the people and by the people is complete lawlessness. That's what democracy is really made up of. It's not of Yahweh. Okay, Yahweh is left out of that evaluation there, or whatever equation. So it's a government of the people and by the people where everybody has a hand or a say in the laws that they follow. And they don't really all have a say in it because it's passed, and as we were reading history, by a few wealthy, powerful people. And that's the way it's always been. It's always been a few powerful people who have stepped in. And the thing is that they stay in power, but they're behind the scenes. And so they have their puppets. It's the same with the Vatican. Okay? You can ask, who runs the Vatican? Well, some people will say, well, it's the Pope. Well, we know that's not true. It's not the Pope who runs the Vatican. The Vatican itself is the entire system. The entire beastly system that surrounds this whole earth and is scattered throughout all the earth. Vatican City is simply the one location, the capital that they are. But that's not the whole Vatican. Okay? But then some people will say, well, it's the Black Pope. Well, no, the Black Pope has power and stuff with the Jesuits and so forth, but he doesn't run it either. In fact, you know who runs the Vatican? Nobody knows. You know why? That's how deceptive it is, and that's how powerful this system is. It's because it's always used the same system as where this person knows so much, this person knows so much, this person knows so much. How do they build top secret stuff in the military? You work on a project, you know this much, and that's it. That's all you do is you do this job right here, then we'll take that and we'll move it over here. You do this job right here, and that's it. You know nothing more. And it's moved from place to place to eventually the whole thing is assembled. No one knows entirely how it's all put together because it's all broken down and made in secret. And that's how they're able to keep the whole project a secret. It's the same with the Vatican. The Vatican is scattered out through the entire world. And they have their officials everywhere, and they all work for the same common goal. And that's how they're able to have so much power that they have and so forth. But you can't just put the point finger at one person and say, that's the person responsible and has control, because it's not true. Okay, let's go on here. He says, the wealthy, powerful people. Now, they've always set their people up, and even especially here in the United States, they've always done this because, as I said before, when the United States first was discovered, okay, every time, and this goes out worldwide, whenever they spread out worldwide and they sent out a ship, they always sent priests, missionaries they called them, to try and go and spread the word of the Lord to everybody. And of course, as we saw, we know that was either convert or be killed, right? Now, they put the fear tactic in people so that when they went into a territory, they could weaken the people. Now, they did the same thing with the Israelites and so forth, and fightings, and throughout the scriptures, you see where, how do you weaken a person? Well, when you go in and you invade their country, if you take them out of their country and put them someplace where they're not familiar with, now you really have control over those people. Because where they were at, they were familiar with their surroundings. They were familiar with the weather. They were familiar with the way the crops grew. They were familiar with the animals and so forth. Now you take them out of that area and you move them someplace else. You've weakened that people. So you have more control over them because now they're in a totally different area. And it really affects the people, the mindset of the people. And so this is all war tactics and things that they've learned, and they've always put this into play. The Vatican has always done that. So, he says, these laws are passed before they're ever passed out here in the public. Okay? These laws are put into effect, and then people find out about them. Okay? And this occurs every year. I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds. There could be 700 laws. I think one year there might have been 700 laws passed just in Texas. In 1 year. Okay, that's just in Texas. Now imagine all the other places throughout the United States. These laws are passed before they've even passed out in the public. They are long brought into action and voted on, and it said, yes, we will pass this law. We will pass this law and this law and this law and this law. And then we'll put a stop to this and bring forth this, where it will bring more money into our pockets and make us richer. So they're saying, yes, we'll pass this law. Well, it has to be for their own benefit, okay? And this is why you wonder why somebody can go into politics and stay a congressman or a senator or whatever their whole lifetime. You wonder, it's like, how can that be when it's supposed to be voted? You mean people like the way that they do that? You're always hearing people griping and complaining about their representatives in the government. But yet these people still get in over and over and over again, and so it's a government of the people and by the people, okay? And it's the wealthy, the elite, are the ones who have the power and authority and so forth. Now, this is what I want you to realize too. So, after reading that, you've got to understand the importance of this sermon, okay? The evil in democracy is that it takes away choice, okay? Because Yahweh's way is you're free to choose life. Remember Deuteronomy 30, verse 19. You're free to choose life. And the truth that's set by Yahweh's plan for his elect is fair. It's fair for all. That's Yahweh's law. It's fair. It takes in consideration, love, care, and consideration for you and your neighbor. Right? Love your neighbor as yourself. Now, democracy's way is a choice really by deception, because you can choose a candidate or you can choose to vote for a particular law, but the choice is really forced upon the population. So it makes it a lie. And you're free only if you keep within the guidelines, of course, of the man's laws that's made by the wealthy elite. And it's been planned by others for the benefit of themselves before you even know about them. And that's not fair for all people, And that's the evil that we find in democracy itself. Okay, let's go on here, back to the book here. Now, everybody knows the poor are getting poorer and the rich are getting richer. And you think about it. I mean, what can you do with all that money, It's crazy. It's the same today. There's no way a man under this present situation, or this regime as they call it, could actually build himself an empire or a substantial living for his family. He's living from hand to mouth, and his wife is forced to work. The children are forced to go out and get jobs and mix into the world. That's under this administration. So this is what's taking place in individual homes throughout America. But notice, it wasn't so in Yahweh's laws. In fact, even, underline this, even the lowest slave only worked for a very short time. He says, I think it was 4 months out of the year. Okay? 4 months out of the year. So it's a very short time. He could have worked more and gained more income, but he had a great living for himself and his family at 4 months out of a year. He could spend the rest of the time with his family or whatever he wanted to do. Under Solomon, notice, underline this, under Solomon, when the kingdom of Yahweh was set up, it was that way. Okay? It was that way. And if you want a reference, you can reference 1 Kings chapter 10 and 2 Chronicles chapter 9. Okay, 1 Kings chapter 10 and 2 Chronicles chapter 9. And that talks about when the Queen of Sheba came, and she saw all the officials, and she was just, like it says, her breath was taken away from her, and she just was amazed in the way that Solomon had the kingdom set up. But everybody was joyful. Everybody was doing their assigned task, and that's what they found their place. Right? They found their place within his government. And that's what Pastor has taught us, to find your place within the house of Yahweh so you can enjoy life. So he says, today it's not that way. The rich keep getting richer, but the poor are held in check. Remember, the poor are held in check. Remember, we covered that earlier, that they got that chokehold, remember? It makes you think about what Genesis 49 talks about. Remember, where Yada will have his hands on the neck, okay? So they will have this chokehold. There's no way the majority of the poor people could go out and pass a law that minimum wage could be $25 an hour. There is no way that you can. Even though 99% of the little people would vote for it, if they would have an equal opportunity, there's no way that you can get it through. You're not going to get anything fair through the government in that sense, okay? Because it's not made. Because if they know that if people made more money, then what did they do? Well, they come in and they raise the interest rate and all this kind of stuff and raise the price of living, right? So it's like, okay, so you make $25, $75 an hour, okay? If it costs you $25 for a loaf of bread, that's going to be pretty tough eating, I mean, can you imagine? But that's what they do. They'll jump up on the prices, all these prices, and make life hard for people. So it brings the people down, and they keep control over the people. And that's why it's not equal to Yahweh's laws, as we'll see here. Okay, with Yahweh's laws, it's equal. Okay, it's equal. Well, let's stop right there. Handout, you catch your 1825. 1825.
You say the way of Yahweh is not equal? Hear now, O house of Israel, is not my way equal? Are not your ways unequal?
All right. Here in the Yekesky 18:25, here's what he just read. Okay? You say the way of Yahweh is not equal. But here now, house of Israel, is not my way equal, or not your ways unequal? Now Strong's, okay, says this, the word equal is number 8505. And it means to determine by measure. In other words, it's measured out. Remember, Yahweh says you have equal weights and measures, right? It's content, okay? It means to be content, all right? Now, also character. A righteous, positive character, that you're not going to mess somebody over. You're going to be fair with everybody. It means to equalize, or to be equal. And it's usually translated equitable, fair, just, and impartial, okay? And I think that might be a footnote that's in that area, okay? Okay, so let's get back to the book here. So the difference that this law, this beastly system, the little horn has brought forth, and Yahweh's laws is amazing, or Yah-amazing, right? For instance, in health, they reject Yahweh's laws, and they encourage you to find desirable, or what your body lusts after, let it lead you to do, right? That's what they teach. They advertise the lust continually so that you will go for it, fall for it, and buy their goods. Okay? They advertise it. This is, I looked this up. I forgot where I got this from, but it says, sex in advertising is the use of sex appeal in advertising to help sell a particular product or service. According to research, sexually appealing imagery used for marketing does not need to pertain to the product or the service in question. Sex sales became a controversial issue with techniques for enlarging and titillating the audience, challenging conventional moral standards. Well, remember, people used to have morals at one time. That's completely faded away from people. But what's interesting is that, it says that it doesn't even need to pertain to anything. You can have a person. There's one advertisement where this big, muscular guy comes into a. I think he's in the shop, in a supermarket or something, and these two women are there, and one of them's got a little baby, and they get some, whatever the product is or whatever, and the baby hands it to the baby. The guy hands it to the baby, and the baby plays with it, something like that, throws it up or something, whatever, and says, "Dada." And what does the mother say? "I wish." So what's she doing, She's committing adultery in her mind right there, So fornication and adultery is just pushed, and this is in subtle ways. Now, that's sex selling, but that's in a very subtle way to where it's not anything like, having a beauty queen up there selling a light bulb, or something, something that's totally unrelated in any kind of way, But that's the thing, is that's the power that Satan uses. Now remember, Satan has gone after the wealth of the universe, okay? That's what she's after. And the scripture says she has it. Yahweh tells you that she's got the wealth, and that's what she lusts after. And she has put this in the minds of all the others that follow her, all the other gods. So notice, back in the books, he says they coax you into breaking those laws. Then they sell you drugs that will not cure the curse that you have brought upon yourself. Underline this, I'll highlight it. The drug business itself is billions and billions of dollars a year. Billions and billions of dollars a year. And then notice this. He says the drug business is more than the nuclear industry. Well, you can't really find too much about the nuclear industry, but you can find about orange sales, and that's what I found here, because it says the U.S. sold a total of $55.6 billion in weapons worldwide in the fiscal year that ended September 30th, up to 33% from the previous fiscal year, and a near record. Drug sales in the United States in 2019, that's this year, $360.3 billion. Now notice the arms sales is 55. That's a huge, tremendous amount. But drugs, $360 billion. So it's just like he says here, that the drug business is more than the nuclear industry. Now he says the nuclear industry years ago, he says it was an $850 billion a year business. He says it's more than that now. They have bombs now that they can sell you, that they can burn everyone in that country up with radioactive material. You think you won the war, since all the people are going to be wiped out and you won't have so many to take care of and overpopulate the earth. Remember, depopulation is one of the things, the agenda that is being pushed because they think that there's too many people in this world. So they want to thin it out. He says, did you know that this was a part of the plan too? This was part of the plan that ex-President Bill Clinton actually mentioned, that the earth must be depopulated to a certain point by the year so-and-so it's going to be. Which is really stupid, because all the land that there is, this land that people are not even living on. It's plenty of people. If we're going to resurrect trillions and trillions of people, and they're all going to be on this one earth, it's going to be, you're going to see there's a lot of room. But he says, what I'm trying to get you to understand, and that's what I want you to understand too about the sermon. What I'm trying to get you to understand is the difference in the laws. What Christianity has brought to the world today looks great. It's the government and laws passed by certain individuals. There is an alternative motive behind every law that is passed by these individuals. They will pass one law, and then they will have to pass another law because the first law is causing trouble. It's not like that with Yahweh's laws, okay? Man's laws are not for all people. They are for the benefit of a few people. Yahweh's laws benefit all people in all aspects of life. In fact, remember, Yahweh's law governs life itself, right? It governs life itself. Now, whether it's gathering wealth, whether it's gathering health, whether it's training your children, or building your family, Yahweh's laws will guide you. You can't find that. You can't go to a government official office someplace and get a free booklet on how to do those things, right? Well, with Yahweh's laws, they will guide you into all these things. If they went into effect today, there would be no such thing as lawyers and divorces where a man builds for his family and then it's all sucked away by a greedy wife or a greedy husband or someone is killed. These things do not occur with Yahweh's laws. That is the difference in Yahweh's laws and the beastly system of democracy or demonocracy, okay? And to really kind of sum that up, that's what I had on the bottom down here, which you might use for a reference note. Proverbs 29, verse 7. The righteous care about the cause of the poor. Because remember, he always says you'll always have the poor. But the wicked doesn't regard the knowledge, such knowledge, okay? They don't care. They only want for themselves. And in verse 26, Proverbs 29, it says, many seek the ruler's intervention as in man's form of governments, right? But justice for men comes only from Yahweh, okay? It only comes from Yahweh. It's the only way that you'll get justice. You'll never get justice. I don't care if you bring your case to the Supreme Court and it takes you 20 years to get it to there. You're never going to receive justice. Because justice only comes from keeping Yahweh's laws, which are righteous and just, right? And that's what just means. It means righteousness, okay? So that's the difference between demonocracy and the perfect laws of Yahweh, okay? And these are the things that Pastor tried to bring out in this sermon right here. So hopefully you caught that. May Yahweh bless you.